And just to get fully clear, vulnerable, and transparent with you, I spent a large contingent of my life in middle school, high school, even elementary, middle school, high school, being told I would never be anything, being told I would never be enough, right? So to this day, it's still a huge driver, proving to myself that I am who I say I am. And unfortunately, you don't get to just go post it on your Facebook and say, "Oh, I'm this incredible. I'm a man of God. I'm wealthy. I'm fit." You don't get just to go say that. You need a large stack of undeniable accomplishments that prove who you are is who you say you are. And so I'm perpetually chasing that, right? And you know, like I said, that was a huge driver for me. And to this day, I mean, I still, you know, still want to be the best I always can be. When I feel like I'm not, I do feel I'm doing a disservice to
Yeah.
myself and those around me.
Well, I was going to ask about that, and I hope you understand at this point. Like, I like to ask questions that I'm genuinely curious the answer to. I'm not suggesting one way or the other. That's one right there. Like, I think about a lot. I mentioned I'm not particularly religious, although going through this podcast, I feel like I do. There is more of like a spirituality to me, and I do have a greater appreciation of something bigger than us. But in that vein, like, so you mentioned life as a kid. Obviously, that sucks, man. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Genuinely, it sucks that anybody has to go through something where they feel like they're not good enough or not going to make it. When you think about that, though, like, how do you think about what's a bigger driver? And maybe it's one and the same thing, but the drive to like overcome that and prove to yourself that you're somebody, or is it truly just to do right by God? And it's not to say those things are opposed. Maybe you'll say that's the same thing. But if you're being really honest, like, is it a deep religious belief that drives you to be better each day? Or is it that, like, fuck, man, I know what that felt like and I'm never going to let it feel that way again? Like that internal drive.
I think for me, it's both, right? And either way, it really doesn't matter what the answer is because I believe that God is the perfect planner. And I believe that God's way decides all, right? And so personally, I feel like he puts me through experiences in life to teach me something, right? To give me something, right? And so when I was the poorest I've ever been, that was a blessing by God to show me what I'm capable of, to show me that I can persevere, to show me that I can walk through pain and go through, you know, that valley and that shadow of death, right? And get out to the other side as a stronger man, right?
Mm.
And so either way, where that personality traits comes from, it was given to me one way or another
Yeah. So
by a
it's
higher being.
it's almost, and I'm going to take, I hopefully not too far on a tangent, and maybe it's not, maybe this is right in the core of what we should be talking about, but um so there's a complete faith, there's a complete trust in God in that, right? No matter if it's good, bad, indifferent, whatever it is, there's a trust and a faith of like the plan is there, and there's a beauty to that, totally. I wonder in that, like, and again, I ask this genuinely, I'm curious how you think about it. One of the things I always worry about, remove the God piece of it for a second, is like, what if I have a blind spot? What if I have some bias in some way that I don't see, and I have this feeling that what I'm doing is right, but it's actually hurting someone or harming someone? I often go to the extreme and use the example of like a Hitler, just to use it. Like maybe he thought he was doing the right thing, and look at all the unbelievable harm he caused. How do you like think about that part of it? Because when you have complete faith in God and say whatever it is, I trust it. Where does the questioning be able to come in if you get something wrong? Like, is that something you think about?
Yeah, it is, and I think there's a very real and raw example of that playing out right now between Hamas and Israel. Right, you have two groups screaming from the mountaintops, "I love God, I love Jesus," and there's evil and there's violence and there's so many crazy things going on. Right, so oftentimes we don't necessarily get to make sense of His way. Right, that's not always. It's not up to us to always make sense of it, and oftentimes you will never you don't get to make sense of it until it's hindsight. Otherwise it wouldn't be, you know, divine, right? But I will say this though, to anyone out there who does have that blind spot, let's just use an example and take God completely out of it, right? You have John and you have Joe, right? You have John, he's he's living his life, going to the bar, drinking, not getting up, not going to work, looking at his neighbor's wife with lust, right? He's doing all of these things. He's not sticking to his word, right? He's not being a good person. He doesn't really have a whole lot of moral compass, right? And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, I mean, where do you think the path between those two individuals is going to play out? Right? So obviously you have life after death, but there is such a thing as heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I feel like having moral structure and moral guidelines in your life, regardless of what you attest it to, can bring you blessings, right? Doing right by people, having morals, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I do. I really do. And even for people that the God part of it again is an issue, which I get. I'm saying, like, whatever you want to call it, the universe, whatever it is, like doing good things, doing it the right way, logically, however you want to look at it, it's going to bring more good things. Now, obviously, figuring out what that good thing is, that's kind of the trick in it and the question. And I'll use your example because I think it's a great one to illustrate the question I was asking before too, right? So like, I forget if it was Joe or John, but the bad guy, the quote
Yeah.
unquote bad guy, right? Like, couldn't he, and I'm not asking this to like play semantic games, I'm genuinely curious, couldn't he say like, well, I'm looking at my neighbor's wife, I'm lazy, I'm going out drinking, but God's got a plan, man, and this is what God wants me doing right now, so I just trust it, and I have, just like you were okay with when you were poor, he could just be like, well, this is what it is right now. How do you avoid
Yeah.
that?